went into the decision to have Dean in the starting lineup tonight with that?
I just have this, kind of feel we need to be strong defensively to start the game. I think that's our best, defensive lineup. And, if Dean Wade makes shots like that, it makes it, an incredible lineup. I know it's another different lineup, right? But they seem to have figured it out. I thought we had good flow with that lineup.
Is that what you would like the starting lineup to be on a long-term basis?
I think for now, I think that's the plan. We'll see. There'll be games where we might have to match up differently or start differently, but I like the size. I like the rebounding. Rebounding is still an area where we have to improve. When Dean's on the court, we rebound the ball a lot better. And I thought the job he did on Michael Porter Jr., that guy's having a great year. I thought he was incredible defensively against him.
Kenny, there were a lot of positives to come away from tonight's game. What was your favorite aspect of tonight's matchup?
I think that's just seeing that starting lineup and see how they jive together and flow together. So that was really good news. And I think the second thing at JA is he didn't take a step back. He might have taken a step forward. I thought he was the most energetic. Kind of dominating on both ends, and James was elite. I'll just give a shout out to his defense. I think he had a 98 defensive rating when he was on the court. Really smart. I just love his contests. Like he's so long, and when he contests shots like that, man, we get that kind of effort. Be tough to beat us.
Kenny, obviously, when you get up 43 points, you kind of empty the bench out. Thomas Bryant was the only person not to check into tonight.
Yeah, I wanted to get Larry some burn. I just feel like, get Larry some run. TB will have his minutes. But it was more about Larry getting him minutes at the 5.
Mark, it's only 4 games, Coach, but it feels like part of the reason that Jared's been so aggressive, and even Evan a little bit tonight, is when James makes those passes out of the pick and roll. He kind of throws it to open space and says, hey, you got to go get it. And when you're catching it, you have one choice. It's go finish it. Is that something you've noticed as well in terms of the up of aggressiveness in the big man?
Yeah, no, I think he does a great – it's almost like a quarterback leading a receiver. You don't have to wait for it. You catch it kind of in stride. And then the other advantage we have that, another team that's blitzing James Harden. Like we're in this kind of like blitz package, and when you're in the blitz package, you throw it to the you're big in the pocket, and they got to make decisions. And that I think that's a big part of it. But you have to ask JA, but I'm sure he's even more eager. Because he knows he's going to touch the ball a lot with James in the pick and roll.
In your offense in the past, you've kind of predicated motion and cutting and constant movement. When you have a guy like James Harden who thrives in a pick and roll situation, you kind of have to find the balance of both. Are you comfortable going more pick and roll heavy with a player like James Harden?
Yeah, I think you got to lean on your best player's strengths. I think, and Don's a really good pick and roll player. But that's something we have to. This is part of. Kind of my this kind of observation period, how much cutting and moving we want. We're still doing a fair amount, but you just got to be careful against a blitz, because if you start running guys away and into the lane, James has got no outlet, so it's almost like you have to have a blitz package and read that, and then when you're in a normal coverage, we can do our cutting stuff. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how that all evolves.
Kenny, Evan back on the court. I'm sure there's going to be some ramp up as the game's going. But what did you see?
Yeah, definitely a little rust. I thought his second stint was better. Gotten a little more groove. Defense was better, but you know how it is. He's obviously on a minutes restriction, so it was not easy for him to get it into a flow. But like I said, I thought his second stint was better.
A big part is trying to see, what he can do with James Harden. You talked about getting some of those looks and figuring out what that duo could look like. Were you able to get some of that?
Saw some flashes. That lob, Evan had to mismatch, and James just put it right at the rim, and Evan kind of just put it in really easily. So it's recognizing the mismatches, recognizing when we do have an advantage with Evan or JA on their smalls, especially a team like that was switching a lot. So Evan's going to be fine. It's just going to take him a little time, and as his minutes go up, it'll look smoother.
Joe.
Kenny, with the stretch of 5 and 7, how important was it to
Yeah.
make a statement right off the bat, but also
I
get you
thought-
guys rest?
I thought the same thing. This is a professional performance. We handled our business, especially going into a back-to-back, especially against a team that's playing really good. And then Detroit, we got other challenges right on this 5 and 7. So it was nice we could manage the minutes tonight. That'll help us. That'll help us tomorrow night, and then during this 5 and 7 stretch. So that was really important.
Chris.
Kenny, going off of that, there's typically a level of uncertainty about how a team's going to come out following the All-Star break. Just how much of a point of emphasis was it to set the tone for the entire second half of the season?
Yeah, I think we talked about it, when guys were a week before we went into the break, how important it was that guys kind of continued to work during All-Star. I know we had people in different buckets, but some we had a few guys coming back from injury, and again, I think we handled that professionally. I know guys worked. Normally it's take 3, 4, 5 days off. This is more like I called it a working vacation. We need to keep our bodies moving, make sure we got in the gym. I think most of the guys did that. Again, that's part of a professional approach, but also, Chris, we got some catching up to do here, and we got a sprint here at the end. So this is a good start, good first game out of the box.
The players have talked since the trade deadline about a different level of belief, a different dynamic that's in the locker room, a different level of confidence. At this point, based on what you've seen, what do you think you guys are capable of?
Well, I'll just say I felt that too tonight, almost like a renewed energy, a belief, and I really felt it with our defense. Wow, holy man, this is. I've been seeing this level of defense, locked in, kind of all year, and that comes from confidence, I think, right? When you're not confident, you're not as aggressive. So they know, we got something good going on. We brought in, guys that are going to help us, and now we got to confirm it, right? I'm not going to sit up here and after 4 games or whatever and say where's this juggernaut. We still have a lot to prove, but I think the early returns with our spirit and our confidence and our aggressiveness is really good.
Last two, Nate and Jim.
Kenny, sorry. Obviously, we ask you about Harden all the time, but how would you characterize what Schroeder and Ellis have brought?
Yeah, I don't know how many deflections those guys had tonight between them. Keon's. I'm not sure I've seen that in the league. He can get in the passing lane. I think he had 3 blocks tonight. It's, and I knew that was part of his statistical profile, but to see it, see it live is impressive. And then Dennis, the energy it's a nice contrast to our first unit, which is kind of bigger and, we're a little more physical. And then we throw Dennis in there and Sam and Keon. We it's almost like a different look with our speed and aggressiveness defensively. So, really, I'm really excited about that second unit because of those guys.
With when Dean comes off the court, you guys don't have a ton of regular rotation guys who can match his size defensively.
Yeah, fair.
Between now and the playoffs, what kind of levers might you pull to see how you might want to defend bigger wings when he's off the court?
Yeah, I mean someone's going to have to take the challenge. James, Donovan, and Donovan's very capable, right? But that is something. And Sam, I know everybody, he doesn't have their size, but he can do it. I think Keon could fit in that bucket. But I hear where you're coming from, because we can't play Dean for 45 minutes. So it's going to be key, matching up to whoever that wing scorer is and having a secondary guy. But we gotta find that person.
And how do you feel about guys like JT and Sam, who have had bigger roles this year, sort of trying to refit their way into the...
Yeah, man, what a change. I did the rotations today. I'm like, oh, that's all the minutes they're playing. They've gone from major kind of players in the rotation to a kind of a different role. You see Sam tonight, he had 32 last game. Tonight he wasn't not as big a role, but these guys get it. Like, that's the other thing I feel like we have a group that like understands that and understands their role, and that is not always the case in this league. And that's evidence in like their spirit. Sam's not shaking his head, or JT's not, losing his mind. Not being kind of main piece. So that's going to be important if we want to do something big at the end of the year.
Okay, all right.
All right. Thanks so much.